Imagine this scene. A cold, desolate beach stretches endlessly beneath a sky heavy with storm clouds. A medieval knight, weary from years of crusades, sits across from a silent opponent, death itself. Between them rests a simple chessboard. Each move, each captured piece, is more than a game. It's a negotiation for answers. The knight does not play merely to prolong his life. He plays because he wants certainty. He wants to know if God exists, if suffering has meaning, if death is truly the end. He believes that if he can postpone checkmate long enough, he might finally unravel the riddles of existence. This unforgettable image, from Ingmar Bergman's 1957 film The Seventh Seal, is more than cinema. It is a mirror, held up to the modern human condition. Like the knight, we too sit at our chessboards. We too bargain with time, with fate, with mortality, desperately hoping to find the formula that will make life make sense. Look around and you'll see it everywhere. Our bookstores overflow with self-help manuals. Social media promises hacks for productivity, relationships and eternal happiness. Therapies, religions, philosophies and courses, each one marketed as the missing key. Each one whispering, solve this, and you will finally find peace. And yet peace never arrives. The more we search, the more restless we become. The more we dissect life, the less we seem to live it. What begins as a noble quest for truth quietly transforms into a trap, an endless game where the clock keeps ticking and death keeps watching. This is exactly the tragedy that the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard warned about almost 2 centuries ago. In a world that increasingly worshipped reason, logic, and systematic thought, Kierkegaard raised his voice to say something shocking. Life is not a problem to be solved. It is a reality to be lived. At first glance, this sounds almost too simple, even unsatisfying. Surely philosophy exists to give us answers, to guide us through uncertainty. And yet Kierkegaard insists, the more we attempt to pin life down with formulas, the more it slips through our fingers, like sand tightening in a closed fist. Why? Because we are creatures divided. On one hand, we are finite, limited by time, bound to bodies that age and die. On the other hand, we yearn for the infinite, for meaning, for eternity, for transcendence. This tension between finitude and infinitude generates the very anguish that drives us to create systems, rules and strategies. We hope they will protect us from chaos, but often they only deepen our disconnection. So we keep playing chess with death. We keep analyzing, planning, postponing, believing that if we find the perfect move, the perfect philosophy, the perfect belief system, we will finally conquer the unknown. But Kierkegaard warns, there is no victory in this game. The true leap is not to win, but to abandon the board, to stop negotiating with death, and to start living, even in the face of uncertainty, paradox, and risk. In this video, we're going to explore Kierkegaard's vision of authentic existence. We'll uncover why reason can become an invisible prison, why anxiety is not merely a curse but a sign of freedom, and why the leap of faith is the most courageous act a human being can make. Most importantly, this is not about abstract philosophy. This is about you, about me, about all of us who find ourselves caught between analyzing life and actually living it. If you've ever felt trapped in your own head, paralyzed by questions, or haunted by the feeling that life is passing you by, Kierkegaard's message may be exactly what you need to hear. Because life, as he reminds us, is not solved on the chessboard. It is lived in the salt of the sea air, in the warmth of human connection, in the trembling courage to step into the unknown. So let's put down the chess pieces, just for a moment, and see what it means to live. Look at the world we live in today. On the surface, we are more advanced, more connected, and more knowledgeable than any generation before us. We have access to centuries of philosophy, thousands of religions, endless shelves of psychology and self-help, and more podcasts and motivational videos than anyone could ever consume. Yet for all of this, something is still missing. People are more anxious than ever. Depression rates climb. Burnout spreads like wildfire. We have more information but less wisdom, more tools but less peace. Why is that? Because like Bergman's knight playing chess with death, we are still trying to outsmart life. We've simply replaced the medieval quest for salvation with modern strategies for productivity, success, and personal optimization. Instead of seeking indulgences or holy relics, we chase morning routines, time management systems, and the latest breakthroughs in neuroscience. Our obsession takes many forms. We buy self-help books that promise a 5-step path to happiness. We sign up for courses claiming to reveal the secret to success. We scroll endlessly through social media, hoping someone out there has cracked the code to fulfillment. But each time we think we've found the answer, it dissolves. A new trend, a new guru, a new book replaces the old one. And still the core problem remains. Life refuses to fit into formulas. Kierkegaard saw this coming long before the age of YouTube influencers and wellness coaches. In his time, the obsession took shape in philosophical systems and rigid religious institutions. Brilliant thinkers built massive frameworks to explain reality, to pin down truth in neatly ordered categories. And while these systems dazzled the intellect, Kierkegaard believed they quietly starved the soul. Why? Because systems make us spectators. They promise security, but they distance us from the raw pulse of existence. Instead of living, we analyze. Instead of acting, we wait for certainty. We trade the risk of life for the illusion of control. And that's the heart of the tragedy. Humans are desperate for control because we are terrified of chaos, emptiness, and death. We think that if we can just solve life, if we can finally arrive at certainty, then we will be safe. But Kierkegaard insists, safety bought at the cost of living is no safety at all. Think of how this plays out in everyday life. The person who spends years reading about relationships but never dares to open their heart. The dreamer who endlessly plans their project but never begins. Lonka, the seeker who tests out every spiritual path but never truly surrenders to the mystery of existence. Each of these people, Kierkegaard would say, is stuck at the chessboard, moving pieces, delaying death, convincing themselves that one more move will bring clarity. But the truth is harsher and more liberating. There is no winning move. Life cannot be mastered the way we master a skill. It cannot be solved like a puzzle. The moment we believe we have solved it, life slips out of our hands. And yet, this is not a reason to despair. For Kierkegaard, it is an invitation. The invitation to step off the board, to stop obsessing over solutions, and to start experiencing reality directly. Yes, this is frightening. It means stepping into uncertainty, accepting risk, and abandoning the dream of absolute guarantees. But it also means something else. It means freedom. Because when we give up the obsession with answers, we discover what has been here all along, life itself. In its messiness, its contradictions, its fleeting joys and sorrows, life is not something to be solved, but something to be lived. And so the question becomes, if life is not a problem, how should we live it? What does it mean to move beyond the chessboard, beyond analysis, and into authentic existence? To answer that, Kierkegaard gives us a roadmap, a map of 3 great stages of life. Each stage represents a different way human beings try to face or avoid the abyss of uncertainty. And only one stage offers the courage to live fully. Let's step into that map. At the heart of Kierkegaard's philosophy lies a striking observation. Human beings are torn creatures. On one side, we are finite. We are born into bodies that age, weaken, and eventually die. We live within the boundaries of time and space, limited by circumstance, bound by the laws of nature. No matter how much we dream or desire, we cannot escape the reality of our mortality. And yet, on the other side, we are infinite. Within us burns a longing for eternity, for meaning, for something greater than the fragile boundaries of the present moment. We dream of lasting love, of eternal truths, of lives that matter beyond the brief span of years we are given. We reach upward toward the infinite, even as we are rooted in the soil of finitude. This tension between what we are and what we yearn for is for Kierkegaard the defining drama of human existence. He calls it the source of our anguish. Think about it. If we were only finite creatures like animals, perhaps life would be simpler. We would live, feed, reproduce, and die without tormenting ourselves with questions of meaning. If we were only infinite, pure spirit, untouched by time, we would never know the ache of limitation. But we are both. And that paradox produces a restlessness that no formula can soothe. It is this restlessness that drives us to create systems, philosophical, religious, scientific, or personal. We hope these systems will reconcile the gap. We hope they will give us the security of finitude and the transcendence of infinitude at the same time. Kierkegaard was fascinated and deeply critical of these attempts. He saw them as ways of avoiding the real task of living. Instead of facing our anguish honestly, we build elaborate structures to distract ourselves from it. Some escape into pleasures and distractions. Some cling to duty and order. Others seek comfort in rigid belief systems. Each of these, Kierkegaard argued, is an attempt to solve life, to remove the tension, to silence the questions. But here's the paradox. The more we try to silence anguish, the more it grows. Like the night on the beach, the harder we fight to outmaneuver death, the more consumed we become by its shadow. For Kierkegaard, anguish is not a flaw to be eliminated, it is the very pulse of existence. It is the evidence that we are more than animals, more than machines. It is the proof that we are capable of freedom. He writes that anguish is like dizziness. Imagine standing on the edge of a great cliff. You look down and feel a shiver in your body, not just fear of falling, but the awareness that you could jump. That vertigo, that unsettling awareness of possibility, is anguish. It is the dizziness of freedom. And this is Kierkegaard's great insight. Anguish is the price of being human, but it is also the path to becoming fully alive. If we run from it, we lose ourselves. If we face it, we open ourselves to authentic existence. But how then do we face it? How do we live within this paradox of finitude and infinitude, of limits and longing? Kierkegaard answers with a daring proposal. By understanding the different ways people try to live, the different stages of life. Each stage is a strategy for handling the tension. Each stage promises to solve the problem, but only one truly leads to freedom. And so Kierkegaard invites us to examine these stages carefully, because somewhere in them, we may recognize our own lives. If anguish is the dizziness of freedom, then human life can be understood as a series of strategies to cope with it. Kierkegaard described these strategies as stages or spheres of existence. They are not rigid categories or chronological steps, but rather different ways of living, different answers to the question, how do I face the tension between finitude and infinitude? He identified three great stages: the aesthetic, the ethical, and the religious. The aesthetic stage, the pursuit of pleasure. The first stage is the aesthetic life. In this sphere, a person lives primarily for enjoyment, novelty, and stimulation. The aesthetic's motto is simple: I want to feel alive. He chases experiences, romance, travel, art, music, fine food, entertainment. His greatest enemy is boredom. Life must be exciting, colorful, and full of sensation. Think of the archetypal seducer, like Don Juan, who endlessly pursues new lovers, not because he loves deeply, but because he craves the thrill of conquest. Or the modern equivalent, someone scrolling endlessly on social media, chasing likes, hookups, or weekend parties, always seeking the next high. At first, this stage feels intoxicating. There is joy, beauty, and freedom in the pursuit of pleasure. But Kierkegaard warns, it cannot last. Pleasure fades, excitement becomes routine, the party ends, the scroll loses its magic, and the aesthete is left facing the same boredom he tried to escape. And worse, beneath the surface thrills lies a deeper emptiness, the unspoken awareness that life has not truly gained meaning. The aesthete may laugh loudly, but when alone, he often feels hollow. Thus, many eventually abandon the aesthetic stage and search for something more stable. Here, the individual seeks stability through commitment, responsibility, and moral order. Unlike the aesthete who chases the next thrill, the ethical person embraces structure. He marries, works, serves his community, builds a reputation. He seeks meaning through predictability, through being a good person. The ethical life is noble. It brings dignity, respect, and the security of belonging. The ethical man does not float aimlessly from pleasure to pleasure. He builds, he sacrifices short-term enjoyment for long-term stability. And yet, Kierkegaard points out, the ethical stage has its own trap. Beneath the order and duty may lurk another form of avoidance. The ethical man may cling to rules, traditions, and responsibilities not out of freedom, but out of fear. Fear of confronting the absurdity of life, fear of stepping beyond the known. Duty can become another chessboard, another strategy to delay the confrontation with chaos. And in the silence of night, even the ethical person may feel the same anguish as the ascethite, the haunting sense that no structure, no rulebook, can shield them from death, uncertainty, or the infinite. 3. The religious stage, the leap of faith. The third stage is the most paradoxical and daring, the religious life. Here, the individual acknowledges that neither pleasure nor duty can resolve the tension of existence. Life remains absurd, unpredictable, and full of contradictions. And yet, instead of fleeing this paradox, the religious person embraces it. This does not necessarily mean joining an organized religion. For Kierkegaard, it means taking a leap of faith, choosing to live passionately despite uncertainty, to trust in something greater than reason, to step into life without guarantees. He illustrates this stage with the story of Abraham, commanded by God to sacrifice his beloved son Isaac. From an ethical standpoint, this command is monstrous. From a rational standpoint, it is absurd. Yet Abraham obeys, not out of madness, but out of faith. Kierkegaard calls this the teleological suspension of the ethical, a willingness to go beyond universal rules in obedience to something absolute. In the religious stage, life is not solved but embraced. It is lived with trembling, risk and paradox. Faith is not certainty, it is courage in the face of uncertainty. Kierkegaard's stages are not ladders we climb in neat order. Many live their whole lives in the aesthetic or ethical stage, never taking the leap into the religious. Some oscillate between them, few arrive at faith. But for Kierkegaard, only the religious stage allows us to live authentically. Only here do we stop trying to solve life and begin to live it fully, with all its contradictions. And this is the challenge he throws at us. Which stage are you living in? Are you chasing pleasures, clinging to duties, or daring to live in faith? The answer may reveal whether you are playing chess with death or stepping into life. For centuries, human beings have celebrated the intellect as our greatest gift. From ancient Greece to the Enlightenment, we were taught that reason was the key to truth, freedom and happiness. Through logic, science, and philosophy, we believed we could finally conquer uncertainty and secure a place for ourselves in the cosmos. And to a certain extent, this is true. Reason has given us medicine, technology, and countless insights into the workings of nature. It can indeed open doors, clarify confusion, and protect us from superstition. But Kierkegaard issues a warning: when reason becomes absolute, when we worship it as the final authority, it transforms from a servant of life into a prison. He compares reason to a sharp blade. Used wisely, it cuts through illusion, but used recklessly, it cuts too deep, wounding the very heart of existence. The problem is not reason itself, but the way we elevate it to the throne. When intellect rules, life becomes reduced to analysis, to categories, to abstract systems. Instead of living, we spend our days dissecting. Instead of engaging, we observe from the sidelines. Kierkegaard calls this the danger of becoming a spectator of one's own life. Think about the knight from the Seventh Seal. He sits across from death, moving pieces on the chessboard, bargaining for more time, so he can think, so he can know, so he can find certainty. But while he calculates strategies, he is absent from the present moment. He is not looking into the eyes of his loved ones. He is not feeling the salt of the sea air. He is trapped in thought, waiting for an answer that will never come. That is the invisible prison of reason, and it is a prison many of us know too well. Consider the student who endlessly studies philosophy but never dares to live by it, or the dreamer who drafts plan after plan but never takes action, or the seeker who analyzes every possible spiritual path but never commits to any. In each case, the person becomes a spectator. They watch life pass by, safely hidden behind the wall of concepts and calculations. And in this safety, they lose the very thing they were seeking: authentic existence. Kierkegaard insists that the intellect alone cannot capture life. Life is not a theory. It is not a puzzle that can be solved through logic. It is raw, immediate, and paradoxical. To reduce it to reason is to drain it of its vitality. But why do we cling to reason so tightly? Kierkegaard identifies the root: fear. Fear of chaos, fear of emptiness, fear of death. Reason gives us the illusion of control. It tells us that if we can just understand enough, if we can map out every detail, then perhaps we can escape the abyss. But in reality, this is an illusion. Control is never complete, and certainty is never guaranteed. This is why Kierkegaard's philosophy can feel unsettling. He is not saying we should abandon thought altogether. He himself was a brilliant thinker. Rather, he warns against letting thought dominate life. Reason must be a tool, not a master, because when reason sits on the throne, it demands that life be solved before it can be lived. And since life cannot be solved, the result is paralysis. We wait, we calculate, we analyze, and we never leap. Kierkegaard's challenge is this: dare to leave the spectator's seat. Dare to step onto the stage. Yes, this means embracing risk. Yes, it means facing uncertainty without guarantees. But only then do we exchange the cold safety of the chessboard for the warmth of living reality. The invisible prison of reason may feel secure, but it is still a prison. The door is open. The question is, will we walk out? Few words capture modern life more accurately than anxiety. It haunts our workplaces, our relationships, our thoughts at night when the world goes quiet. We often treat it as an enemy, something to be suppressed, medicated, or avoided at all costs. But Kierkegaard gives us a startling perspective. Anxiety is not merely a symptom to be eliminated. It is a fundamental part of being human. It is, in fact, the very signal of our freedom. he draws a crucial distinction between fear and anxiety. Fear always has an object: fear of losing a job, fear of an illness, fear of a dangerous animal. Fear points to something specific, and once the threat is gone, fear dissolves. Anxiety is different. It is more diffuse, more unsettling. Anxiety has no single object. It is the sense of standing before a vast openness, an infinite range of possibilities, and realizing I am free to choose. Kierkegaard calls this the dizziness of freedom. Imagine standing on the edge of a tall cliff. You look down and feel your stomach twist. Part of that feeling is fear. You could slip and fall. But there is also something else, the awareness that you could choose to jump. That sudden realization of your own freedom, your own terrifying power, is anxiety. It is the same in life. We stand every day before a field of possibilities. We could change careers, end a relationship, move to a new city, create something bold, or remain where we are. Each choice carries weight. Each choice closes off others, and the recognition of this responsibility can feel overwhelming. This is why Kierkegaard insists anxiety is not a flaw. It is the inevitable byproduct of being free. To eliminate anxiety completely would be to eliminate freedom itself. But here lies the tragedy. Instead of embracing anxiety as a teacher, most of us try to escape it. We build systems of certainty, philosophies, religions, routines, and ideologies to shield ourselves from the burden of choice. We cling to what is familiar, what is safe, what feels stable, because facing the openness of freedom is simply too dizzying. Kierkegaard warns that these systems often become forms of existential procrastination. We keep busy with explanations, rules, and formulas to avoid confronting the raw anxiety of being alive, and in doing so, we become disconnected from the very freedom that makes us human. In the modern world, this dynamic is everywhere. The person who endlessly researches life decisions but never makes one. The worker trapped in performance anxiety, constantly measuring themselves against impossible standards. The social media user, scrolling compulsively, anxious about missing out on experiences, yet never fully engaging in their own life. Our technologies, our metrics, our obsession with performance, they don't eliminate anxiety, they amplify it. Because deep down, they remind us that no matter how much we plan or compare, the responsibility of choice remains ours. Yet Kierkegaard refuses to leave us in despair. For him, anxiety is not only a burden, it is also an invitation. It calls us to recognize our radical freedom, to stop hiding behind systems, and to step into authentic existence. Anxiety is the reminder that we are not locked into one path. It whispers, you can change, you can choose, you can become. To live authentically, then, is not to eliminate anxiety, but to walk with it, to let it sharpen our awareness of freedom, rather than numb us into avoidance, to feel the dizziness of the cliff's edge, and still step forward into life. This is why Kierkegaard says that anxiety is both our greatest danger and our greatest gift. It can paralyze us, trapping us in endless reflection, but it can also awaken us, propelling us toward the leap of faith. And it is this leap, the decision to live passionately despite uncertainty, that Kierkegaard presents as the ultimate answer. But before we arrive there, Kierkegaard introduces one of his most controversial and difficult ideas, the teleological suspension of the ethical, a concept that shows just how radical true faith must be. If reason can become a prison, and anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, then what does it actually mean to live authentically? Kierkegaard's answer takes us into one of the most unsettling and inspiring dimensions of his thought, faith. But here's the first surprise. For Kierkegaard, faith is not about certainty, it is not about having all the answers, nor is it about blindly obeying tradition. True faith, he insists, is born not in certainty, but in paradox. To illustrate this, Kierkegaard turns to one of the most disturbing stories in the Bible, Abraham and Isaac. God commands Abraham to sacrifice his beloved son. From a rational perspective, this is absurd. From an ethical perspective, it is monstrous. No morality could justify the killing of an innocent child. And yet Abraham prepares to obey. Kierkegaard argues that in this moment, Abraham is not a murderer, nor a fanatic. He is what Kierkegaard calls the knight of faith. Why? Because Abraham suspends the ethical. He steps beyond universal rules in obedience to something higher, something absolute. something he cannot explain to anyone else. Kierkegaard names this the teleological suspension of the ethical. It is one of the most shocking claims in all philosophy, that sometimes to live authentically, one must be willing to act in ways that appear absurd, even wrong, to the outside world because the call one follows cannot be captured in rational or ethical categories. Abraham cannot justify his act. If he told others, they would call him insane, and yet he moves forward in trembling faith. Kierkegaard writes, "If there is no God, then Abraham is a murderer. But if there is a God, then Abraham is the greatest example of faith." Here we see Kierkegaard's core point. Faith lives in paradox. It is not the absence of doubt, but the courage to act without guarantees. This leads us to Kierkegaard's most famous idea, the leap of faith. Imagine standing at the edge of an abyss. Behind you is the safety of rules, systems, and rational plans. In front of you is the unknown, darkness, mystery, the possibility of failure. To leap is to step forward anyway, to trust that meaning exists, even when reason cannot prove it. The leap is not irrationality. It is not reckless denial of thought. Rather, it is what happens when reason reaches its limits. Where logic can go no further, faith begins. Kierkegaard describes it like this: faith begins precisely where thought ends. The leap of faith is not limited to religion. It is an existential stance, a way of living. It is the artist who creates despite fear of failure, the lover who commits, knowing heartbreak is possible, the whistleblower who speaks truth, even at personal cost, the dreamer who starts a new path without guarantees of success. Each of these moments contains risk, paradox, and uncertainty, and yet they are also the very moments that give life intensity and meaning. This is why Kierkegaard says the leap of faith is the refusal to remain a spectator. It is the decision to step into life passionately, trembling though we may be. The knight of faith is not fearless. He feels anguish more deeply than anyone else. He feels the weight of uncertainty, the risk of loss, the vertigo of freedom, and yet he still chooses to live. Faith, then, is not about escaping anguish, but about carrying it. Not about finding certainty, but about daring to exist without it. In practice, the leap of faith is nothing less than the decision to stop playing chess with death and to begin dancing with life, to stop analyzing endlessly and to start participating fully, passionately, and courageously. But Kierkegaard's philosophy is not only about heroic biblical figures or abstract ideals. It is about you, about me, about all of us standing at the edge of the abyss. Each of us must decide whether to cling to certainty or to leap into life. And this brings us to the final question. If we truly make the leap, if we stop trying to solve life and start living it, what do we gain? What kind of wisdom awaits us on the other side? That is what Kierkegaard leaves us with in his conclusion, and what we will explore next. We've journeyed through Kierkegaard's world, through anguish, reason, pleasure, duty, paradox, and faith. And now we arrive at the end, where his message stands clear and uncompromising. Life is not a problem to be solved. It is a reality to be lived. For many, this truth feels unsettling. After all, wouldn't it be easier if life came with a manual? Wouldn't it be comforting if philosophy or religion could hand us the final formula, the guaranteed path to happiness? But Kierkegaard insists that such certainty does not exist. Life will never be fully solved. There will always be chaos, always be questions, always be death waiting at the edge of the board. And yet this is not cause for despair. For Kierkegaard, this is precisely what makes life beautiful. The lack of certainty is what makes freedom possible. The presence of anguish is what makes authenticity necessary. The risk of loss is what makes love precious. Think again of the knight in the seventh seal. He believes that if he can just delay checkmate, he might gain the answers he longs for. But Kierkegaard would tell him and us that the real freedom is not in outsmarting death. It is in letting go of the chessboard entirely, to stop negotiating with fate, to stop demanding guarantees, to step into the immediacy of living. This means embracing life with all of its contradictions. It means recognizing that joy and sorrow, laughter and tears, hope and despair are not problems to be eliminated, but experiences to be lived. To seek safety at the cost of living is to lose life itself. Kierkegaard's wisdom is radical because it is not about knowing more. It is about daring more. Daring to make choices without certainty. Daring to live with passion even in the face of anguish. Daring to leap even when the ground is not visible beneath our feet. He challenges us to ask, what is your chessboard? What keeps you trapped in analysis, endlessly waiting for clarity? What systems or routines have become your invisible prison, keeping you from risk? What anxieties have you mistaken for flaws rather than invitations to freedom? Each of us has our own version of the game we play against death. Maybe it's the career we never start because we want everything mapped out first. Maybe it's the love we never confess because we fear rejection. Maybe it's the life we never live because we are too busy solving it. Kierkegaard calls us to set down the pieces, to walk away from the board, to live. And living does not mean recklessness or blind leaps. It means authentic leaps, those acts of courage that align with our deepest truth, even when they cannot be explained or justified to others. It means becoming the knight of faith, not fearless, not without trembling, but willing to live passionately in the face of the absurd. This is the gift Kierkegaard leaves us, not certainty, but freedom, not answers, but courage, not a solution to life, but a way of saying yes to life in all its raw intensity. And so as we close, I ask you directly, what is your leap of faith? What choice, what risk, what step into uncertainty is calling you right now? Where in your life are you still playing chess with death, waiting for guarantees that will never come? Maybe your leap is leaving behind a path that no longer fits you. Maybe it is daring to love more deeply. Maybe it is starting something you've been postponing for years. Whatever it is, Kierkegaard reminds us, no one else can take that leap for you. No one else can live your life. The responsibility and the freedom is yours alone. Life will never be solved, but it can always be lived, and the time to live is now. If this message resonates with you, share your reflections in the comments. What's your chessboard? What leap are you ready to take? I'd love to hear your story. And if you want to continue this journey with us, exploring philosophy, psychology, and the art of living, make sure to subscribe, because the path of authentic existence is not a destination, it's a lifelong adventure. Kierkegaard's challenge remains: stop solving, start living,